Thank you very much for that, Mark. I'm interested in your own personal observation about your own driving behaviour. And in my experience, my career, you quite often find companies which take a really serious interest in safety issues when they've had the bad experience. They never want to have that again. I think the trick is to get them to pay that attention before the bad experience happens. Our next two speakers are going to present some case studies. Actually, I prefer to talk in terms of stories, telling the story. Go out and telling the story of what has worked. People will listen, but we're going to have two case studies, two stories. The first is from Sean Bone-Knell, I hope I've pronounced that correctly, who is Director of Operations at Kent Fire and Rescue Service, who's going to talk about public sector cost reduction.
Okay, thank you very much. And yeah, exactly right. As you imagine, with a surname like mine, it's got a few variations on it as you've gone through life, but that was exactly correct. So thank you. I'm here today just as a bit of an introduction with two hats on, really. One as has been said in my role as a Director of Operations for Kent Fire and Rescue Service, but two as the lead officer for the National Fire Chiefs Council around road safety. Obviously, with my Kent hat on, it's about making sure that Kent Fire and Rescue Service has already engaged with Driving for Better Business, but works its way through to being a Driving for Better Business champion organisation and all the benefits that can bring. In relation to the National Fire Chiefs Council, my role there is, I see it this year, my New Year's resolution, to actually make sure that all fire and rescue services have the question posed to them about why not become a champion or sign up for Driving to Better Business. And the key thing for me within that question is, why wouldn't you sign up to Driving for Better Business? Because I don't think there's any reasons why you shouldn't do. So those are my two sort of like missions as we go through this year. And as said, I just wanted to really try and give you a little bit of flavour as to what Driving for Better Business has meant to us as Kent Fire and Rescue Service, how it's changed us, and where we're looking to actually take it in the future. Just as a little bit of context around our service, obviously it's not huge. We have around about 300 vehicles, something like that. About 95 of those are fire engines. We have about 600 drivers there that actually drive emergency driving as well. About 2.7 million miles that we will travel within our own particular area, and we spend about £700,000 a year on fuel. So that may not seem much when you look at some of the big fleet operators, but if you times that by 45 with the different number of fire and rescue services there are around the country, you start to get into some really big figures then around how there could be some economies of scale and also how we could actually improve the driving standards all round. So the few words I wanted to say today I've sort of put under a few different headings. The firstly was around why. So why do we actually look at Driving for Better Business? Firstly, I think it's vital for us in how we actually deliver our service. It's vital for us as a fire and rescue service to be able to get from A to B, to save life, to render humanitarian service. And we need to do that as safely as possible. And driving is one of the key things for us. We can have the best trained fire and rescue staff, the best trained firefighters at our fire stations. If we can't get them to where they need to be, then we're useless as a fire and rescue service. So driving is really, really important for us. There's also an element of our work when actually we have drivers that are driving at higher speed than normal on the roads. So that puts us more under public scrutiny, more under the magnifying glass if things go wrong. And there's bits I'd like to touch on a little bit further as we go through the talk there. There's also about compliance, as we've heard from people like from the Health and Safety Executive and things like that. We have to comply. And there's more risk that we bring to our business in delivering it when we have people that are driving under emergency conditions. But there's also a huge part of our organisation that has moved across to being actually just normal driving behaviour. And what I mean by that is we took the decision as a fire and rescue authority probably about 6 years now to move away from all of the type of lease and provided vehicles that may well come to have a totally branded fleet. So having a totally branded fleet means that your fleet is much more visible across the county, which means driving behaviour again comes under much more scrutiny. So again, our standards need to be much higher, but we think as a public service that's the right thing to do. So for us, that's why Driving for Better Business is definitely there. I think timing is everything in life, as my father used to say to me, and also for us as a fire and rescue service, this year has been the first year when we've come under the banner of Her Majesty's Inspector of Police as well as Fire and Rescue Service, HMIC FRS. Now, we're being inspected under 3 pillars of that around efficiency, effectiveness and people. Now, driving for business hits all of those 3 pillars when you look at it in its holistic view. So for me, again, in my mission this year, will be taking back to HMICFRS as well to challenge them about why can't things like driving for better business be one of those areas that you look for within fire and rescue services in subsequent inspections. Because if they are signed up that and delivering that across those 3 pillars, I think you'll see some real improvements that will go forward. So how did we get involved in driving for better business as a fire and rescue service? Well, it's really simple. Obviously, there's some fantastic staff that work for Highways England that you can engage with. Also, it's all on the website. We've already heard it's free. There's no barriers there for people to get involved in it. So our fleet manager logged on, went through the assessment, which gives us a real good benchmark then as to where we sit within that. And it gave us some real information to be able to challenge ourselves as to how we can improve in certain areas. There was also some really good support that came to us through the Driving for Better Business seminars that are held around the country. And again, one of those challenges that goes out is to engage with Highways England and to put on some of those seminars in your own areas, invite the people down. For us, it was quite pivotal in some of the ways in which we changed our driver behaviour and changed our fleet. And that was that we, in our road safety experience in Kent, we had a guy called Andrew Kemp from Tesco that came down as one of the business champions to come down and speak about how they manage their fleet and how they manage their fleet in relation to telematics and in relation to CCTV. And it was a real insight as to how you can actually make that work for your fleet and for your drivers. And I know you may sit there and think, well, that's pretty obvious how it goes, but actually having someone talk you through it, not just talk you through the benefits, but talk you through some of the learning that they've been on, that journey, pardon the pun, that they've been on to actually go through in putting in and again, how it's changed the behaviours. And I'll come on to that a little bit more. So what has it actually changed for us as being a part of Driving for Better Business as a service? Clearly, driver policies, it's been one of the things that we need to make sure. It's really influenced our driver training. When I talked about the telematics and the CCTV, it's allowed us to actually try and look much more at a personal profile for our drivers. So not going through, as it probably says within the article in your magazines there, around it being a sheep dip approach to how people go through their driver training. Because as you'd imagine with a fire and rescue service, we have to keep up that training. It could be much more targeted with the information that comes out of telematics and CCTV. You've got hard evidence there. You can see the drivers that are more at risk. You can see the drivers where there's more acceleration, there's more braking, and all those key areas that your fleet managers would want to actually be looking into. And we're able to adjust that to that driver training thing. So for us, that's really good. It also brought about some of the things about where we look at things like licence checks, the electronic checks that we can do now, we can look at the driver reminders now to making sure that all of our drivers actually have got their valid current driving licences, that they haven't expired, that their photo licences have been kept up to date. Because I think from all of us, sometimes the only way when it prompts you to do that is when that reminder comes through. Well, some of those things, when it's generated automatically, makes you much more compliant as an organisation. There's also been a big thing for us around fuel management, and it really, in changing that behaviour, we've seen a big decrease for us around fuel and about how that goes across and how we've managed the fuel. And again, that was some of the things that came out for us from the seminars. Key things for our Director of Finance was about insurance. So signing up for Driving for Better Business, actually engaging with telematics, putting CCTV in your fleet. Yes, there was a cost to that, but that cost has been recovered within the first 2 years in insurance premiums. So we've already recovered the cost, and then again, we're just trying to actually lead from the front in how that can actually drive us forward with being much better with the driver behaviour. We're also now able to look at the size of our fleet. Having the telematics within the fleet, being able to know exactly where your fleet is at any one time, how it's being utilised or not utilised as the case may be, again, has been gold dust for us. So again, we're probably looking at our next fleet renewal of about a 10% reduction in a lot of the lighter fleet as that goes through. It's also assisted us in looking at how we actually utilise that fleet, the heavy fleet around our county, and how that can be managed. But one of the key things, and it's already been touched on in one of the presentations, when it comes into that people element that I talked about, was about the driver welfare. We understand that our drivers, when they're driving under emergency conditions, and any emergency driver, it's a lot of stress that you put on those people. Yes, they have enhanced training, enhanced awareness. It's not something that we mandate people to do. They do it because they want to do that. but it's still their driving licence when they're out there driving under emergency conditions. And if they make mistakes, it's their driving licence that will be penalised and them. And we had a few high-profile incidents, and it was interesting when people were saying about actually sometimes you need some of those high-profile things to actually kick an organisation into being and then to move forward. And I'll put my hands up, we were one of those organisations. We had a few drivers that were involved in quite high-profile accidents. And in the very early stages now for us, and any of those, the telemetry and the CCTV is something alongside our police colleagues we can go to very quickly to actually establish who was at fault or who's most likely to be at fault in that. And if we'd have had that when we'd had those high profile incidents, we would have saved an awful lot when it comes to things like QC advice that we had to get to defend some of the drivers in the particular cases. But what is one of those things which is invaluable will be about the welfare of the drivers. Some of the times when they had to go through different court proceedings, it can take years when it goes through. With a very, very quick look at the CCTV and the telematics, would have actually been able to put that to bed a lot quicker. So we feel as a fire and rescue service now, we stand in a much better position, God forbid if any of that happens again, not only to protect the organisation, but to protect the individual as well. And that goes a long way to then encouraging more people to step forward and undertake that particular role. And one of the other key things that's been mentioned today is behaviour change. I think it comes through with everything. We're always having a challenge in whatever we do, that so what question about behaviour change. Installing that into the fleet, following the driving for better business model, we are seeing behaviour change. I'd say it for myself in driving a car that has telematics and CCTV in it. It does change behaviour, but after a while that behaviour becomes the norm in how you drive in your work vehicle, becomes the norm about how you drive in your own vehicle. And I think it's, again, as a public service, why wouldn't we be wanting to set those standards in how we go forward? So just in summarising there for me, I think we've obviously been going through the better business process, looking to become a champion status. For us, that's all about because we want to be able to share our experiences. We learnt a lot from actually sitting down with people like Tesco when they were operating a large fleet and learning from their experiences. And I think I personally can do a lot through the NFCC to try and encourage that within other fire and rescue services, and we'll do all we can to encourage that. But at the end of the day, I come back to that question that we posed right at the start as to, well, why wouldn't you get involved for driving for better business? Thank you.